All right, today we have Gramps on the show. I appreciate you joining. Appreciate you coming out and sharing with us your book. I usually don't do a big introduction, so I usually let the guests go ahead and just give everyone a little snapshot of themselves, and that way, what can I say that you could say probably better about yourself anyway? So, Gramps, why don't you just go ahead and tell everyone like a little snippet of what you got going on and all that good stuff, maybe a little bit about your background.
I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me onto the show.
Yes, sir.
My latest book is a children's book called I Don't Want to Turn 3. And it's living this past year because of the pandemic caused by COVID-19, in isolation, except for being able to be with my family, gave me a special time to really watch and interact with all my grandkids. I got to tell you, what a trip. I've got 6 grandkids that have completely different kinds of personalities. The one thing they do have in common is a sense of curiosity and how excited they get, when they do accomplish something. And watch them grow year to year and how they interact with each other really is the basis for this book.
So part of the pandemic is just the motivation behind to get this book going and spending time with your grandchildren.
It gave me a chance to figure out what really goes on in a toddler's mind that parents are so desperate to kind of understand. When does a toddler really understand the difference between me and us? This book explores how a family kind of finds out together. And I think I really feel that what happened in this book is happening in every single family in the world. I mean, they're all going through the same thing. As a baby boomer, I am trying to understand how the world has evolved since when I was 3 years old. This is also part of the story is, my parents, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have cable TV. They didn't have remotes. I was my dad's remote. He'd say, son, go change the channel, and I was the remote. So my parents' definition of discipline is quite different than the parents of today. I can tell you that for sure. Has today's world made a better place for kids to grow up? I'll let your listeners kind of answer that question. But how are we growing up our kids today compared to when we grew up?
Yeah. Well, hey, sorry, some of my dogs get a little excited sometimes. Well, speaking of that, I don't have much experience with children at all. I'm just a single guy with 2 dogs in itself. But you said it earlier. You're trying to figure out what is going on in a toddler's mind. I mean, in your perspective and your opinion, I mean, what do you think? With, like you just said, with technology and screens and, it seems like that's to be from the outside looking in, it seems like we have virtual or electronic babysitters now. And for parents, I mean, what do you think's going on with, having an electronic babysitter as opposed to what you just said, actually maybe going outside, not looking at a screen all day. And, what is actually going through a toddler's head? Is that what they want to be looking at as a screen all day, or do they want personal interaction? Or that was kind of a long drawn out question. But.
Well, you take a look at, I really feel that this youngest generation, these kids that are 1 to 10 years old now, is the greatest generation this country has ever produced. And it's a combination of everything. It's a combination of, they're exposed to all this electronic stuff so early, the internet, the phones, the tablets. So that really starts to stimulate their mind and get it going. So they need to be part of what they do is this whole internet thing. But at the same time, one of the main reasons I wrote this book is because I am convinced that we've got to get grandparents more involved in the raising of these kids today. And the reason I say that is, as we get older, and as you well know, generation, as we go from one to get older, we get wiser, just because we fail so much more, we have more experiences. So that's the kind of thing that the older generation has got to relate to these young kids so they can do a balance between all this great stuff that they're learning online, but, real life too. So that really is what we got to be taking a look at is how can we raise these kids so they will become the greatest generation? The real theme of the book is, at what age do you actually take responsibility for your actions? Is it 3 years old? Is it 13? Is it 23? I'm a baby boomer. I got plenty of my contemporaries at 63 that still don't take responsibility for their actions. So that's something that we've got to be able to help with these kids to learn at a younger age so that they become the better generation than we have ever been and move this country forward.
Well, how do you get, a lot of people don't like to take responsibility for their actions just because what you just said, being, 60 X amount of years age or whatever, they just want to throw the responsibility on somebody else. I mean, there's always excuses people can come up with, hey, it wasn't my fault. It was, I was late to work because of traffic, blah, 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 hey, I didn't make that pass just because, hey, the light got my eyes. I mean, how do you instill those morals and values like they actually own up and take responsibility for whatever you're doing? Is it being a grandparent, like you just said, learning from your mistakes, or what?
Well, yeah, I think what we have to take a look at is in my generation, we were a little closer in family. In other words, I grew up, my uncle was up the street, my grandmother was 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
We had a whole family environment. So we had this it takes a village. When you step back and think about it, it takes a village to raise a kid. And that means aunts and uncles and cousins and friends, and it just takes a lot of people to round out a kid. But when you break up the village and we all move all over the country from where we were, it becomes a real challenge. And in my case, I've got one of my daughters and 2 grandkids here in Scottsdale, Arizona, but I've got another 2 grandkids in Austin, Texas, and I've got another 2 grandkids in Orlando, Florida. So we are all over the place. And it's a different way to raise kids today, and the grandparents have to make an effort to get involved. We have to, because the little kids aren't going to call you. My kids from Orlando just aren't going to pick up the phone and call. You've got to get involved. We've got to make up for that loss of family, that has happened. And and the grandparents can do that. And there's all kinds of different ways. I'll give you an example how we did it. During the pandemic, I had all 6 here for about 6 weeks. So we had a chance to really, and that's what the book is based on. The book is a true story. It's based on these 6 kids interacting. And the pictures in the book are pictures that I took while they were here, and then I sent them to the illustrator, and she made it into more of a cartoonish look. But it's based on a true story. So once the kids left for Florida and Texas, how are we going to stay in touch with them? How can we, as an older generation, keep them, in their thoughts? Well, for some reason, little kids, 2, 3, 4, and 5, both girls and boys, love dinosaurs. I cannot tell you why. If you talk to any of your nieces or nephews or friends or kids, they all can tell you about dinosaurs. They can tell you the long names of these dinosaurs. They can tell you if they eat meat. As far as I'm concerned, dinosaurs are small, medium, and large, but they can really, they know the details of the stuff. So we found that they all love dinosaurs. So what we decided to do to keep in touch and to keep, the communication going with all these little kids is we decided we got half a dozen little dinosaurs in our house that every night we were going to move them someplace else in the house. So one night they were in the refrigerator eating blueberries. The next night they were by the sink with their grandmother doing dishes with soap on their noses. The next night they were playing on the piano. The next night they were walking up the steps. And so we had 50 different places around the house and outside the house every night that the dinosaurs were doing something different. Well, that created, we became then part of the routine of these kids. They would take their bath, their parents would read them a book, and then they would say, what are the dinosaurs doing tonight? So they would call my wife's iPhone so we could do Facebook, and they'd say, where's Gramps? Where's Gramps? What are the dinosaurs doing tonight? So that was our way of staying in touch with these kids, even though they're, thousands of miles away from us. And I'm sure your listeners, if they sit back and think about it, they've got other ways that they can come up with to make sure that they are involved in the raising of these kids so that we can start to teach them to take responsibility at a younger age. So that's just my story.
And I agree with a lot what you're saying, just what you're talking about, I came from divorced parents, and I was not as close, as on my dad's side with my grandparents as when I got older as I thought as much as I should have. So kind of, it just, it makes me, regret not having taken that time and extra effort and actually go out and try to get their morals and values instilled on me and what they went through in life. But I want to play devil's advocate a little bit, and just based on what I said, what if the parents don't want to have their children interact with the grandparents as much as you're saying? What are they, and I'm only saying in that just because of, say if boy or girl develop trust issues with their parents, just because, they forgot about something one time, or that parent didn't pick them up from practice or the park, or just whatever example you want to say. And then it's like, well, I don't want this happening to my kid. And I don't want, my dad to do that to his grandchild. I mean, what do you say to them? Say, no, we'll just let them see him on holidays and special events, and that's all they need to interact them with. I mean,
well, unfortunately, there's a piece of our country that feels that way.
Yeah.
In fact, I can tell you that probably in my generation, 40% of us baby boomers, they really don't want to get much involved with their grandkids. I mean, their philosophy is, hey, I raised my kids. If I raised them right, they're going to raise their kids right. I got other things to do. But that's wrong. I mean, if think about what's going on in this country today, and how divided this country is today. And, what we've got to do is, we as the older generation have got to make that effort to be involved with these young kids. And we've got to get our kids to get us to do that. I mean, we have got to become part of the routine. We have got to be a role model. I mean, all adults are role models for these kids. I mean, think about it. As parents, you're definitely the role model of your kid. If your kid sees you on your phone all the time, they see you doing text messages all the time, they see you doing that, so that's how your kids are going to grow up.
Yeah.
That's the kids mimic exactly what you do, especially the 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old ones do. I mean, I can guarantee you that if you're a parent and you start cussing, you are going to hear that cuss word 3 or 4 more times that day, just because they imitate who you are. Now, there's a way to, hopefully, if you lose your cool and you start cussing, what you need to immediately do is start talking about good things like bananas and the raspberries and dinosaurs, so that the kids kind of get off track. But, if you forget to do that, the parents are the role model. And so the grandparents have to become that role model too. And that's just something we have to do if we're going to, these kids are exposed to so much more than our kids were exposed to. I mean, there's so much outside on the internet that they get thrown at them, that we have got to counteract that. And that's the effort that we have to do.
Yeah, I agree that, depending on if a parent's not supervising their child correctly, I mean, you hand them a screen in front of them, depending on what they type in, they could look up, they have the world at their hands right there. They type in anything, and let's say they look up the wrong thing regarding, pornography, or like you said, bad words, or some kind of violence or whatever, that's going to instill into their brains. I mean, the brain doesn't really fully form until, I think, 24, I think, if I remember correctly. So, you're talking about life lessons and stuff. I mean, you don't want them seeing something weird on the internet like that. And that's like, oh, this is what love is. This is what, life is supposed to be, just because I'm watching it right here. And then the parents can't sit down and explain it. Right. I mean, how do you get around that? Just like you're saying, just try to be more and more involved.
Well, first of all, you've got to have, for these smaller kids, you got to have a routine. And one of the routines is you need to read them books every single night. It's just because that's routine that you need to get involved in. Keep in mind that it's necessary for us to teach children how to think, not what to think. They'll learn what to think later on in their life. But we have to teach them at the youngest age how to think. And the simplest way to do that is to read books with your kids. Yeah. All right. Now, obviously, I want them to read my book, but there's 100 other great children's books out there to read with these kids. And there's all kinds of reasons why we should be reading with our kids. The first reason that we should be sitting down and spending that time and taking that 10 or 15 minutes after their bath or before they go to bed is it's a bonding time. Okay. It's a real time where it's just you and the kid and the book, and it gives you a chance to really bond, because our days are crazy. Their days are crazy. Oh yeah. It gives you a chance to sit down and bond with the kids. That's one reason we should be reading books every night to kids. Another reason is it supports listening skills. You and I, as we grow older, we find out that listening skills are the best skills that we can develop, because once we learn how to listen, then we can communicate better. We can talk to people better. So listening is something we have to teach these kids at a very young age. And you can do that by sitting down every night and reading a book because they want to listen to it. It also helps with the cognitive and language development, because when you sit down and talk to a kid and read them a book, there's going to be words they don't understand. It gives you a chance to explain these words. Gives them a chance to round out those words. These are different words that they may see on television or the internet. So helping them learn more words, that's just another way, a part of the bonding and the listening as you're reading a book. And then finally, when you're reading a book, when you're 2, 3, 4 years, you're bouncing all over the house all day long. It gives you a chance to have some attention span. You can sit there, you can have attention for, even if it's only 15, 20 minutes, you get a chance to really do that. If you do that every night, then we will start teaching our children how to think. And that's what we have to do for this latest generation.
What if the child doesn't want to read every night? What if they would rather just watch TV and play video games, and they just throw fits and tell their mom and dad, like, I ain't doing this? How do you ingrain in them into saying, like, let's make this a habit? Because I agree, I started reading later in life than I probably should have. And it's actually, and I try to read 15, 20 minutes a day, kind of what you just said, because that's about all I can hold is with, it's a bad habit for me. Just my mind starts to wander, might be a little ADD or whatever. But yeah, what if the child does not want to learn? They just say, nah, I'm good. I got video games. And then only so much the parents, I would think, I'm generally speaking, would just say, all right, fine. I'm not going to fight this battle.
Let's talk about discipline, all right, and how it's evolved over the years. So let's go back to when I was growing up. I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. All right. My parents, they really were the greatest generation because they saved the world. They're the generation that went through the Depression. They're the generation that fought World War II and saved democracy. This was a very disciplined generation. Right? Without them, we all wouldn't be here like we are today. So you have to have a lot of respect for my parents' generation. But they were also very disciplined. When I was a little kid and my brother Larry and I got into trouble during the day, my mother would say, wait till your dad gets home. And he'd come home and he'd whip out his belt and he would chase us around the kitchen table, that was discipline. In fact, he had a fraternity paddle that he also used. And so one night when my parents were out of the house, my brother and I went to their closet and we grabbed the fraternity paddle. And we lived up in Ohio, and it was in the late fall, and there was all kinds of leaves on the ground. We buried the fraternity paddle under the pile of leaves, and then it snowed the next day. And that spring, we went back out. The fraternity paddle was gone. Oh. It was like a miracle to us. It was like, that's the way life should be, And so, but that was discipline back in the 50s and the 60s. And so then we taught our kids not to be so crazy. We weren't chasing them around the table with a belt. We were putting them in timeout. We were, taking away privileges and all that kind of stuff. And I think, our kids, and again, my kids are in their 30s, so, they're raising their kids now, took that and they perfected it to what I think is great discipline today is, if a kid gets in trouble, most of the parents will send them into timeout. They'll send them into the corner, and the kids don't like that because now they're away from their friends. They got to look at the wall. That's probably the greatest way of discipline. In fact, one of the best discipline things that I heard was a couple of weeks ago. I was at my granddaughter's 3-year-old birthday in Austin. We flew out for that. And, we were playing with her and her brother's 4.5 years old, and they were fighting over some toys. And then finally she sits up and she says, I need my space. And she walks over to the other side of the couch and sits down. And her brother says, I need my space too. And he walks over to the other side and he sits down. Now, they didn't learn that on television. No, there wasn't. Their mother taught them that. I am sure that their mother got frustrated with them at one time and says, I need my space. And she goes off and she needs her space, and the kids are learning from that. So, we've got to have that discipline. I'm sure it's tougher in some families than others, but it's just something you've got to work out. You've got to, I don't want to say force your kids to read books, but they need to read books.
Speaking of discipline, growing up that, I got set in timeout a few times, and I've gotten a belt a few times. And or parents getting away from actually disciplining their children with I guess, a whipping or a spanking or, I mean, at one point in my life, I do remember actually saying, my stepdad told me to go cut a limb off the tree so he could do that to me. I mean, and I'm 35 years old but that's how he grew up, and I think, when he passed, he was 72, 73. So, I mean, is that wrong to still discipline that type of or I guess discipline, punishment, whatever you want to say, onto a child today? Or is it just what you said? Hey, all right, try to instill onto them, hey, we've had too much of each other. Let's go our separate ways for a few minutes and then reset our batteries and we'll come back.
Yeah. Again, this is the greatest generation ever. It's coming up. They're the ones who are going to change this country and make it better. And so we've got to give them the tools to do that. And I know I'm harping on reading books, but the other thing I want to talk about when you convince your child to read a book is, first of all, let them pick out the book. Yeah. Right? Most of us have 20 books laying around for little kids to read. Let them pick it out, because then they become ownership. They become part of that. And then even before you sit down and read the book, you want to ask them, what do you think is going to happen in this book? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's something you want to get them involved. You want to, again, our job is to teach children how to think. And then once you open up the book and start to read the book, who are the characters in this book? You want to ask them where is the setting? Make sure that they're engaged. They get a feel for this so that they can see that they're part of this whole thing. Does the book, anything in this book, sound familiar to you? Can you relate to any of this? And then when you're done reading the book, much like when you have dinner with your kids, or how was your day, you want to say, what was your favorite part of this book and why? Again, we got to get these kids thinking. And I think if we continue to do that night after night after night, then these kids are going to grow up okay.
Do you have a favorite children's book growing up?
I liked them all. No, I guess I didn't. I liked them all. Did you?
Yeah. While you were talking right there, it just hit me that my favorite, I just remember, I know I read a few, but my favorite, my one go-to was Go Dog Go. I don't know if you remember that, but I think Eastman maybe was the author, but I couldn't tell you much about it now. I haven't read it in years, but yeah, that was one of my favorite books. I can just remember, that's one of my memories. And still, when I was always wanting to read Go Dog Go. So
that's great. That's great. We were talking about the questions that you ask your kids, and I think there's one question that if every parent would ask their kid this question, that it could change our world. The question is, what did you do that was nice to someone else? Okay. Now, when you ask your child, a 2, 3, 4-year-old, what did you do that's nice to someone else today? They're sitting there playing toys or taking toys from their cousins, and they're stealing things. But they won't know exactly what you're talking about the first time you say that. But if you ask them that every day, what did you do that was nice to someone else today? Over time, they're going to actually try to figure, well, what can I impress my mom and dad with that I did nice to someone else? Yeah. And if we did that, can you imagine if we did that today, how different our society would be if we could grow up with saying, what did you do for someone else today?
Yeah. There's an importance to being kind and actually, implementing that with, like you said, small children, make it a habit, to actually open a door for somebody. Like you said, what'd you do for somebody? Smile at somebody, say thank you, whatever. And it's almost, I don't want to say it's a lost thing, but it's almost seems to be that, just because, I work at a local university here, and it seems more people were just kind of worried about themselves and the me factor about, okay, what do I need to do today? I don't care about anybody else. It's just me. And, whatever I need to do to get to point A to point B, that's how I want to do it. And, and just like you said, this, I think almost it seems to be like, we're not instilling that value on the importance of being kind, kind of what you were just saying, onto the younger generations, even though that you do, like you were saying, want to be the greatest generation that we have coming up, but doesn't seem to always be there. Maybe that's just me generally speaking, but
so what can we do to change all that?
I don't know.
You're in the prime of age, 35 years old.
Yeah, I
What can
mean,
you do?
well, I mean, you think that, given the power of the cell phones, that listen to podcasts like this, and it's, listen to, like you said, lead by example, people who they look up to and their role models, but maybe not all these generations or children, especially in the inner cities, have people to look up to, and that they're getting their morals and values and skills and whatever you want to say in their language from just watching the internet and just random YouTube videos they see all day. And that's just where it's going in that direction. And then of course, friends, I would think, we're just going to learn more from their friends, as they get older and older, instead of, they hit that rebellion age of, teenager age or whatever. Says, I'm not going to listen to what my parents say. They don't know anything. I'm the smartest kid alive. I mean, that's kind of how I probably was when I was little. I thought I knew it all. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't have the answers. I mean, hopefully somebody with a better brain, like, how do we get, like you said, make this the greatest generation coming up? Because, based on, like we talked about earlier, these are some hard times that might be coming our way, as far as, just with COVID, and we don't know what's the future may hold. I mean, keeping up with the news nowadays, and we don't have to get into this at all, but, with this whole Ukraine and Russia thing, we might go, see something fly off the wall here. I don't know.
Yeah, it goes back to, it really takes a village. It takes more than just mom and dad to do it. It takes the friends, and it's just an attitude that we in America have got to have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with 100% what you said, that I agree it takes a village, but you got to have role models, and just sit down and think, ooh, okay, I like exactly what they're doing. I like how they're living their life. Maybe I should change my ways and try to be more like them, and not 100% complete copycat. But I mean, that's what's helped me out in life, just looking up through people and just saying, I don't think I want to live like that, but ooh, I like the way that person's doing X said thing. I want to, I want to be like that. I'd rather have that type of morals and values. And when people think of me, I would like them to think of me this way, instead of just, oh, he's just a piece of trash,
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If our news would focus on role models rather than the negative news every night, it just would help.
I mean, is it cool to be negative? What are your thoughts? I mean, is that like the thing in today's world? It's like, it's so cool to be negative, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that no matter what, say we go see one of your favorite movies or whatever, like 10 out of 10 people, or 10 out of 11 people hate it. There's going to be that one person that just, oh, I hated it. And like, well, why did you hate it? I thought it was a pretty good movie, and just like, I don't have to tell you, it's like, well, what did you hate about it? You can tell us. I mean, we all liked it, but what did you specifically hate about it? And it's just like, they just want to be negative just because that's, like you just talked about the news and stuff. It's so easy to be negative,
Yeah, you kind of asked yourself as you were growing up, did your family view the glass as half empty or half full?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really does influence how you view life as you get older. As you're growing up, were your parents positive? Did they urge you to do great things, or were they always negative? And that's what's causing it.
Is it cause, how do I want to word this, that parents and teachers and stuff, and I'm just generally speaking, they want to not allow children to chase their dreams. They just want to be more real with, with children and toddlers growing up, saying, somebody saying, hey, I want to be a movie star, I want to be a pro basketball player. It's like, well, only, what?
1%.
Yeah, 1% make it, or whatever it is. And then they're like, so why don't you just go ahead and just focus on going to, college and then getting a 9-to-5 job or whatever. I mean, do you think that's part of it, that we're almost being too real and just shutting down their parades and not allowing them to dream and be real anymore?
That's an interesting point. And I think that you may be onto something. That the parents, don't want their kids to be disappointed, because you want to be a movie star, but there's 1% chance you're going to do it. But what about following the dream for a while? It's gotta help. We all got smarter because we made lots of mistakes. I mean, if you think about it, the wisdom comes because you're not always right. You're not always successful, but you can learn from that. So we need our kids to stumble. We need them to fail, so that they get smarter.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I went down the track that, go to school, get more education. The more education you get, the better job you'll get, and that, and I made plenty of mistakes along the way, but that's exactly how I learned, and maybe having a little bit too much fun in college and stuff, and not, getting the dream job that you thought you were going to get out the road, but you learn, like you said, learn from your mistakes and you do better the next day. And, I think maybe a lot of people decide that, hey, just because I go to college and get that degree, I'm automatically going to be handed whatever I need or that job or whatever. And then it doesn't get it. And or they don't get that job or they don't get that promotion or whatever. And they just shut down completely and just say, well, this is it. There's no reason for me to learn anything else. I'll just stay at this, this position the rest of my life until, I get called up to wherever I go. So you think that's maybe part of it?
Well, today is the best time in our country's history to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Okay. To follow your own dreams, to start your own business. And a lot of that is driven by the technology that we have. I mean, if you think about it, if you want to sell stuff, before you had to open up a brick and mortar store, you had to do advertising in the local newspapers, you really had to spend a lot of money to do that. In today's world, with the beauty of the internet and how you can communicate with social media. I mean, 10 years ago, nobody was really doing social media. Think about the difference of today versus just 10 years ago. And, so if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to try something that hasn't been tried before, this is absolutely the best time there is. I mean, just look, on Amazon alone, there's 1 million people in the United States that are selling products or selling something that they may not have done 10 years ago. So that's just 1 million things. And then what's interesting about that is there is a whole organization now of investment bankers that are finding those people that are selling goods on Amazon. They're doing $1 to $5 million, and they're buying them and consolidating them to become the next big chain. So there are just so many ways today that you can follow your dreams that are not going to break you from the bank like it used to because of all the physical things you had to do. So, this is the time, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or even 60s, to go out and make it happen.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter how old you are. I mean, especially if you just have an idea and a goal that like you said, with today's technology and everyone's resources, you can make something happen if you really want it to happen. But, why you said that, I mean, it was a great thought that if you think about it, that's basically what, if you want to say America was founded on, I don't want to say founded on entrepreneurship, but that's how we grew to, I guess, where we are today with people taking chances and opening up these small businesses and turning them into huge corporations. And, and a lot of people will argue that small businesses are still the backbone of this country, which, I'm not saying they are not, but yeah, I mean, if somebody doesn't like the route they're going, if they have a great idea, I mean, I forgot who said that, but it was a pro football player. I can't remember said, but yeah, if you have a great idea, don't worry about going to college. Just worry about trying to make that idea happen, and run. And I'm not saying that's 100% right. Don't go to college because I went, but yeah, if you have a great idea, I mean, if you really want to do it. I mean, go for it,
There's 30 million small businesses here in the US. It's been pretty consistent over the years. There's 30 million small businesses here. Wow. Which is, and there's only 250,000 huge businesses. So it gives you an idea how small businesses really are the backbone. I mean, take a look at what you're doing, podcasting. Yeah. Who would have thought of podcasting 10 years ago?
Exactly. Yeah, there wasn't many. This is the first thing I've actually took a leap of faith on and tried something for myself. And
yeah. And so why did you do it? What drove you to do this?
It was like you were talking about earlier. It was part of COVID. And I've always, like, ever since podcasting started coming about, well, not 10 years ago, but maybe last 4 to 5 years, I found a couple of people that I enjoyed listening to. And I've gotten a lot of great pearls and gems from it, and it's like, oh yeah, I don't always have to do things that way. I mean, I like what they're saying. I learned something from that person. I learned something from that podcast. And I was like, well, you know what? Maybe everything that I'm learning, everything that's ingraining in on me, I would like to be able to share with it and actually have conversations like the ones we're having right now that actually even self-educate me more on, X topics or whatever, like ones today, some of these topics that I'm still scratching the surface on, trying to, get to where it's like, I want to be more comfortable talking with them. But that was part of the motivation behind it, was that, I thought podcasts were in, like, having conversations like this was almost dying just because of electronics. Just everyone just seemed to be like, I'll just put a screen in front of my face and watch Netflix all day until I ready to go to sleep. But it was just like, no, but I enjoy having conversations like this, and not saying that, I can bring a lot to the table, but with you educating me with, your background, what you've been through in your life. So it's like, hey, this is interesting, and I enjoy it. And that's something that my, listeners might get. I don't want to say my listeners, but the listeners will get something out of, and I get something out of, it's an enjoyment for me, and it just, I think there was a lot of, positive attributes to actually starting a podcast. And that was maybe a little bit longer answer than what you asked, but yeah, that was mainly the gist of it all though. So,
I mean, think about the industry of podcasting. I mean, where are there, 1 million podcasts or 500,000 that are active?
Millions now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and nobody was doing that,
No.
just 10 years ago. So it just shows, podcast is an example of, if you've got the desire, America is the greatest place in the world. Just do it. And you're on and you're running, you're up and running. So congratulations on hitting your dream here.
Yeah, I appreciate. Well, I don't know if it was a dream, but it was something that, like I said, that I wanted to do, and I wanted to at least take a chance on, and me and my buddies were doing it the first few episodes, and I never thought past that it would really take off. I just figured I would get my fix for it. Like, okay, well, I'm good with it. We don't have to do it anymore. But no, like I said, I've started interviewing people like yourself, and it was, wow, I get something out of it. So sometimes, like, I feel like I'm in a bad mood and I really don't want to do these. But then after sitting down and talking it out and stuff, I come away with, man, I learned a few things for that. Man, I really, enjoyed that. It changes my mood altogether. It's little things like that. Just, like there's little wins in life, I guess you get that. We were kind of talking about a little bit earlier, just trying to get those wins and doing something kind and learning something new. And so
that should be your tagline, mood changing.
All right, I might make a note on that right there. But I mean, so let's kind of get back, circle back here a little bit. But so how long have you been writing? I mean, this wasn't your first book, was it?
Well, interesting. My first book is a book called The Secrets of Retailing, How to Beat Walmart. I don't know if you can see it here.
Yeah, I saw in the background there.
Yeah. It's
How to Beat Walmart. Okay.
Secrets of Retailing, How to Beat Walmart.
So what's the theme of that one?
Well, I've started a couple of businesses. One I sold to investors, the other one I took public. And the one I took public became the premier business-to-business site on the internet, where we sold in case quantity to small businesses all around the world, shipped in all 50 states, around 40 countries. Our customer base were the moms and the pops who are surviving and thriving as chains. Okay. So basically, we sell products at wholesale and closeout prices. And so you can come in and Main Street America, you can buy products to compete against the big guys. What was happening is we were building the business. I was getting all these calls from entrepreneurs and small businesses saying, what do I need to do? How do I do this? So the book is 15 different chapters, a step-by-step guide of opening a business. So one chapter talks about how you should hire people and who you should hire. Another chapter talks about the real estate. Another chapter talks about, the products and how to buy them and things like that. Another chapter talks about internet marketing. Another one talks about regular marketing. So it's a whole book that talks about the step-by-step guide to opening up a business. So that was my first book. And what happened was Arianna Huffington read the book, and she asked me to start contributing to the Huffington Post. And I don't know if you're familiar with Huffington Post, but I've written over 100 articles for Huffington Post, a lot of it on small businesses and on how to entrepreneurs and things like that. But what happened, because we are so dominant on the internet with keywords and phrases, thousands and thousands of them, that when Katrina hit, it was 20 years ago already. Wow. When Katrina hit, that because we were so ranked organically 1, 2, and 3 and all these words, all of a sudden we were getting these calls from nonprofit organizations, churches and schools that wanted to help the less fortunate. So we were selling underwear and socks and toothpaste and toothbrushes. And then when they opened up the trailers, we were doing all the kitchen supplies and the bathroom supplies and the bedroom supplies. And so it opened up a whole world. We talk about the entrepreneurship and pivoting and coming up with ideas, that we figured that the nonprofit world was underserved because they were coming to us because they could buy cheaper, they could stretch their dollars and help more people. So we pivoted, and then half the business started going to nonprofit organizations. So part of my articles that I write for the Huffington Post are on nonprofit subjects like the homeless and the elderly and education and things like that, because that's what we've learned from all the nonprofits that we sell to. In fact, that's kind of how the book ends. The children's book, I Don't Want to Turn 3, is all the kids decide to give all their toys to the homeless kids downtown. And that came from an idea that my oldest grandchild, who just turned 9, Olivia, she was having a drive at her school to help the homeless. And so she came up with the idea, let's give all these toys to the homeless. And so that came from, but it felt good because that's what I was working on over the last 20 years.
And I kind of want to touch on some things that you just spoke about, but do you think in the future years, like we're seeing in bigger cities like San Francisco, the homeless situation seems to be almost getting out of control? I mean, you think the future of will we see this just keep growing, or will we actually try to take more and more steps? Not we, when I'm not going to probably be doing much, but cities and states be taking more to try to make a solution towards the homeless in this country.
Yes, I feel very strong about that. In fact, one of the offsets of all this money that's coming into the local governments for the COVID relief is it gives them the funds to help this situation. In our town here in Phoenix, Arizona, Tempe is purchasing some buildings to help the homeless, to put the homeless into. Yeah. And I think you're going to see that happening. So an offset of this terrible COVID thing is it could be that the state and local governments have the funding now to help take care of the problems that we've been sidestepping for years.
Do you think? I mean, I've read reports that where people in their local governments and state governments are getting these types of monies just to help these situations, but it's almost that, they're lobbying for the money, but just keeping it to make big paychecks for themselves and not really doing anything about the homeless situation at all. Just for example, like in San Francisco, where it's almost gotten out of control, I think that there's even a map right there where you can see where homeless people have defecated on the streets, and they can actually tell you where like not to go on these specific streets. And I'm not saying I've been that way, but it's just reports that I've actually read and articles that it just seems like it's gotten to be where, it's just a corrupt politicians, which, we know that obviously that happens, but is it just more of that, just trying to keep all the money for themselves, you think, instead of do the work on a situation or work on a problem?
Even though this country is more divided than it's ever been politically, I do think that the politicians we do have a heart. And I do think that they will be coming together in crisis situations like this. So I think that local and state governments will be working together to help these situations. There's some things that the bipartisanism does work on, and this is one of those. We can still be arguing about all kinds of other things politically, but I think the social aspect of seeing relatives and friends and veterans homeless, we've hit the peak, and I think that we're all focusing in on that. It'll take time, but I think it'll be better today. It'll be better tomorrow than it was yesterday.
Yeah. I want to take it back a little bit, just because I don't want to go off too much of a political soapbox, I guess, but what is it like for a toddler or a child growing up in a pandemic? It's something that this is obviously my first pandemic and never experienced anything like it. And luckily I wasn't really in quarantine, we worked from home for a few months, but then the university brought us back. But so I couldn't imagine though, being, in a big city where it was like, hey, you cannot go outside your apartment, your house, or whatever you want to call it. Is that going to inflict on a child's learning cognitions like you were talking about earlier, or just saying, hey, this is just what life is right now, and I know we've kind of gotten back a little bit to where, we're actually children are going back to school and they got away from the virtual learning, but it seems to almost be with the rising cases of Omicron, we might be seeing virtual learning come back.
Yeah. These kids lost a year. There's no doubt that they lost a year of education. Now, because they're young, they can make that up. Right? Because the what they lost they could make up. Now, unfortunately, not everybody's got internet in this country, so not everybody was able to do virtual learning. So it just helps with the greater divide between those that have and those that don't now. So again, it's up to us to make sure that we even this all out. So yeah, they're a little bit behind, but I'm comfortable with our educators of today. They're very dedicated, and I think they'll be caught up. But again, that's why it takes a village. That's why more than ever, we got to get grandparents involved. No matter what their economic feeling is, they've got to help bring these kids along. But the internet's helping them. If this would have happened 30 years ago, the generation would have been very far behind. Because how would they have learned from home?
Oh yeah. There would have been no way, right? I mean, just whatever books you had laying around the house, or whatever you could just scrape together and maybe make up as you just go would be the way to ingrain it if this would have happened, 20, 30 years ago, before internet. One thing I didn't realize was that during this pandemic that not everybody had internet, like you just said, and I forgot where I picked that up from, but yeah, that you were not the first person I heard that from. And I was like, wow, there's still not everyone has internet. That kind of blew my mind. And yeah, it just really surprised me that.
Yeah, we're out here in the West in Arizona and New Mexico and Utah. There's a lot of tribal reservations, and they're vast. They're huge.
Yeah.
And they just don't have internet, and it's scary. It really is scary.
When you're reading to your grandchildren or toddlers or whatever, I mean, are you breaking down the concepts of your book or whatever book you're reading at the time? We may have touched on this a little bit earlier, but just kind of breaking it down for them and like saying, hey, this is what lesson you should be getting from, this paragraph right here or this part of the book. And this is what I want you to try to take away from it. Is that what you're kind of ingrained as being a role model and a grandfather?
I would like to say yes, but I don't think that's what happens.
Okay.
Because you go into it thinking this is what's going to happen, but again, let the kids ask the questions and let them explore. Because if you start to get in too heavy with them too soon, they wander off. What you have to do is develop a habit of reading in kids. Number one is, like we talked about before, be the role model. Let them see you reading books or reading magazines or reading. Let them not see you on your phone most of your waking days. You've got to have a bedtime reading routine. So have them take their bath. Next they know they got to do the reading. It's got to be part of the routine. It's just got to be part of what you do. And you have to set up a special place in your house for these books, whether it's a piece of the kids' little bedroom, whether it's out in your living room. Got to have a little library, a little place for them to know that it's a specific space to kind of study, to have it there. It brings back home the idea that, this is important to mom and dad, that I read a book every night. So it's got to be someplace there that does that. These books, you should always make sure they're colorful and they're attractive, because younger kids, the visual parts of them really is what gets these kids going on these books. And then, you got to know what their tendency is. Do they like to read alone? In other words, mom and dad, I'm going to read this book by myself. Or do they like to be read to by mom and dad and grandma? They got to do that. And just make sure you are limiting screen time. Kids, they're going to be on the screen 2-3 hours a day, but make sure it's not 8 hours a day.
Do you let them? Yeah, seriously, not 8 hours a day. Do you let them pick the book, or do you try to pick it for yourself?
I think it's important, if you've got a nice selection of books, most of us do, we're inherited. I mean, I've got books from my parents and my kids, and I got a bunch of little books here, but let them pick it out. Because again, that starts the ownership. That starts them to feel like, oh, this is my time and I'm part of this. They're not dictating to me. I'm part of this.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've always thought that, if I wanted to read something, I would actually sit down and read it, as opposed to somebody saying, hey, you should read this book. It's like, no, I'm not going to read it. I'd rather read it just because I want to. And just because you like it, but I might check it out, but then I'll try to get interested in it. But yeah, if I've even learning anything in life, if you really want to learn it, you'll actually sit down and take the time to learn it. And that goes with everything in life. If you really want to do something, you'll do it. But if you want to make up an excuse and just say, I'll just start tomorrow, and then here comes tomorrow, and you're like, you're not really going to do it. But yeah, I agree that if you let, a child pick out something they want to read, then they'll be more interested.
Yeah, you just hit on something very important. You want to create the curiosity that builds imaginations. So, create that curiosity. Let them kind of wonder why, because the more curious you are when you're younger, the more imaginations you have as you grow older.
Yeah. And, I remember during this conversation, I was just trying to remember like my brother and I, like the made up games we played when we were little and just letting our curiosities and imaginations just run wild, and just based off if we did read a book or whatever movie or TV show we were into at the time. But yeah, and that was a fun part of it. But then it seems like you almost lose that as you get older, but because I guess things become more real, you have 14 different things in your head all day and you don't really think about trying to acting like walking around your backyard like a dinosaur or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, wouldn't it be fun to be kids all the time?
Yeah, man. I mean, like, yeah, I forgot I've read a meme or something like that on the internet. And this was probably, not too long ago, but it said, what was your favorite time growing up? And it was like somebody wrote on there, I was 6 years old. I could do what I want, not have to pay bills all day and stuff. And I was like, yeah, that was that was a great time to be alive. All you did was worried about when playtime was and when you probably got something to eat. So
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, were you pretty close with your grandparents like this? I mean, did they kind of instill some of these values on this, on you when you were growing up?
Yes, but in that generation, all the grandparents died when they were 60s. Okay,
Oh,
and so luckily I had one grandmother who lived into her 90s. And she was spectacular.
wow.
But the other ones, you learn from them when you're 9, 10, 11. That's about it. So they were gone. Yeah, and that's another reason why today grandparents have to get involved. I mean, I've lost plenty of friends to this COVID. I mean, just think about the amount of people that have died, in their 60s and 70s that shouldn't have been dying right now because of COVID. And so we as grandparents, we've got to take advantage of this time, because again, kids, you only have influence on kids from, up until 18. Well, probably not even until they're 18, only when you're a little younger, but you only have 18 years, that's, that's just 2 decades. It's not a lot of time. Decades go by fast when you get my age.
Yeah.
And so you've got your children, your grandkids are only young once, and you may only be here today and gone tomorrow. So that's another reason why we have got to make an effort to get involved with these kids, is because we're dying. COVID is not kind to old people. So you got to make sure to be part of this and make that effort.
Yeah, that's one thing I've just been learning a lot more lately, just that time is fine. And that one thing that I've said a couple of times on here, that no amount of money ever bought an extra second piece of time, and it's just something that's like, I try to be more aware of what I'm doing with my time, especially, by having conversations like this, what I'm doing at work, what I'm doing outside of work, trying to, get in shape or stay healthy or whatever. But it's just, how do I manage my time to be better than yesterday, I guess is what is the moral, or that point I was trying to make right there. So,
yeah, it brings up another point that, when you love, you will teach others how to love. So, when as older people, as grandparents, as parents, if you show love, others will learn how to love. And so we can't be bashful with that either. It's just another thing that we've got to push on to these younger kids, that when you show them how much you love them, they're going to learn how to love.
and speaking of that, it seems like there's a trend that families are having less and less children compared to, like baby boomers or whatever. And I mean, are you going to see that we'll see, lower populations of children and people in the future? I mean, in X amount of years, just because of, like you're talking about COVID and hardships, people don't want to have big families much anymore just because of, usually the main reason is financial, and some people just want to have all the time to themselves, as opposed to trying to, come home from their 9 to 5. And it's like, all right, well, I got to spend time with the kids now and make sure I'm putting in my work for them. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Another cause of that is when I was younger, we got married. The baby boomers got married 20, 21, 22, 23. I mean, we got married young. It's generation. Some of us got married older, but Now I've got 3 daughters and I've got 1 son. All 3 of my daughters got married in their 30s. Okay, they didn't get married. That's 10 years later than I got married. And my son, who's 42, is still not married. So it's a whole different world, and so that's flipping on us. So as you get older, you don't need as many kids.
Well, yeah, I guess I mean, that's true. Yeah. But, with the future of education, the future of grandparents, future of parenting, I mean, what do you see in 20, 30 years down the road? I mean, with, even with times we're now, I mean, do you think that, we're coming back out of this and we'll see a better life for the younger generations and then what we're leaving them with? And just, I hope that kind of made sense what I was trying to ask. But
yeah, no, I think you're right. In other words, I think that just what's going on in this world today, the technology we have, the new businesses that are being created, I think life is going to be better for these kids coming up than it is for your generation.
You know what? And I think we should kind of take it home on that, especially this what you just said. Try to end this on a good note. Especially, I wrote down your quote that you just said, that when you love, you'll teach others how to love too. So I really like that. But before we end this, so why don't you tell everybody if they want to find you, if they want to find your books? I mean, where do they do that at?
Sure, you can find both books. I Don't Want to Turn 3, my children's book, and The Secrets of Retailing: How to Beat Walmart on Amazon. And you can find the children's book on Barnes Noble and about 100 other sites around the internet, or come to my site, grampsjeffrey.com. That's Gramps, JEFFREY.com. Or I love to talk to or be in contact with any of your listeners to talk even further about these things. And they can reach me at grampsjeffrey@gmail.com.
Great. Great. Anything else you want to say, or anything you want to send a positive message to grandparents now that, maybe they should be thinking about something before, again, we take this home, and something you want to leave out here with?
Yeah, just get involved with your grandkids, please. They need us to help round out who they're going to become tomorrow.
Great. Gramps, this is great. I'm glad we had this conversation. I really appreciate you doing this. This was great.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it too.
Yes, sir. And, if you write another book down the road, we'll get you back on here and promote it a little bit and talk a little bit more about how life's going, and see if more people are getting involved, or more grandparents are getting involved with their kids.
You got it. Thanks.
Great. Take care, everybody. We're gone.